Welcome back, episode two. We got Roger and Brent with us for another episode of Watching Privacy. Brent has some new Rams gear today. Seems like he has been on a shopping spree for the better part of this year. So, looking forward to new outfits every week. But let's dive right in. I think we got quite a few topics to cover, and I think we'll start with. I'm pretty sure the phrase is imitation is the sincerest form of flattery because I felt like there was a lot of content from this, I would say, pretty viral John Oliver clip from his show. And basically, he talked about data brokers at length, which at the end of the day is great. Any kind of awareness that we can bring to this topic is extremely appreciated. And so he went into a couple different areas, some of it which we've talked about on the show before, some of which, in typical, I guess, show fashion, he kind of went off in a and did some kind of a stunt type thing at the end, which we'll see what actually comes of it. But the main points of the show, basically, he talks about data brokers. He talks a lot about anonymization and anonymized data and it not really meaning anything in the grand scheme of things. He talked about the Muslim prayer app we covered last year at some point about how that was being used to what do you call show or keep track of application users and all that kind of stuff. And he talked about some of the biggest vendors in the game when it comes to data brokers and aggregators, how you have no control over it. Did you guys get a chance to check out the clip and pick out any different pieces that we didn't cover, but they might have gone a little bit more deeper into?
No, I think this is not obviously news to this group.
Yeah.
Most of the topics we have covered. He also talked about Life 360. I think we talked about it in a couple of episodes last season. So nothing's news here, but I'm actually glad this brings in more visibility about data brokers and whatnot. We touched on data brokers a few times last season. One thing I felt was interesting is. Him making an association with HIPAA, no regulations are in place for grabbing this information because they are not officially collecting it from the user, so it doesn't come under HIPAA and whatnot. So I thought that part was interesting, and towards the end, I certainly like that part. To see to see who is going to collect that. It'll be interesting to see if somebody is willing to take that challenge and publish that online. Because I mean, nobody wants to take that up because I know, they'll get in trouble.
Yeah.
Especially the link to the Ted Cruz thing he mentioned.
I mean, I think we talked about it last year too, but there was that one story of that guy who was trying to get into like Y Combinator and he got like YouTube or LinkedIn ads to target the founder in order to get his company's like visibility in front of him, and then finally like targeted just that one person. Basically, he did the exact same thing. He just created a couple ads, geofenced them to the DC area, made them, I would say, provocative in order to make certain people type of click on them. And then once you've clicked on it, you know their IP addresses, you know their general locations. You cross-reference that with some other data sets, and it's not that hard and arguably not even that expensive to kind of run this little whole experiment that he's got going on here. But I mean, if anything, it seemed to kind of maybe it verged on maybe the side of blackmail, possibly. I don't really know, extortion even. But at the end of the day, whatever it takes to get some more voices in the conversation and take this a little bit more seriously, I think is a net positive. So there's no real downside here, I don't think.
No, I was surprised that our buddies Clearview didn't come up in any of that. I was really looking for that name to pop up during that 25 minutes. Maybe the next one he does.
No, that probably requires a dedicated episode. I don't think we can get away with the 5 minutes.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised about that.
Yeah, they should get their own episode when you think about
it. They need that FaceTime.
They want your FaceTime. That's really it. The one of the things that a couple of parts stood out. The one where he showed a clip of, I don't know, I don't think the guy was he worked at Google, but he's the expert who went to put a few search terms in and landed on a site, and he was counting the trackers. I think he said he went to 2 sites, and by the time he had gone to those 2 sites, the number of third-party trackers that they found or identified, I think it was like around 20, and just from 2 jumps, 20 third-party trackers. And depending on what site you go to, you could hit that number,
Uh,
within one.
apparently, apparently he didn't visit Formula1.com.
Yeah, I was going to
Oh,
say the same thing. You got to go to f1.com and then just check out the trackers that are there. If you have Safari, it's super easy. Um, but
wow! How many
that is
trackers we
definitely
talking?
like the wildest thing. Like on Reddit, there's this one post that someone took a screenshot of like all the cookies that you can enable and disable, and the screenshot is like razor thin, but like incredibly long. Like it is scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. It's got to be hundreds probably every single ad exchange, every single ad platform you possibly could have worldwide. I mean, F1, maybe FIFA, those types of like
Mhm.
global brands, especially sports wise, are obviously doing a lot in the advertising space. And so it makes sense that they would have that much, but it is insane that they have that much. No wonder the website is so, what do you call maybe heavy and maybe not very good in general. But
Mm,
yeah, the
yeah.
Formula One
One more
website
thing.
is,
One more interesting point I thought John Oliver made when he was talking about like police and folks who are wanting information, and can't get it without getting a search warrant or some sort of a federal or a legal a warrant to be able to collect that data. They can actually go and buy it from the data brokers, and apparently there's no law against that. So it's like, how could that? That's a serious loophole. So if you go through legal channels, or if you don't go through legal channels, you can't use it, but you can buy it. I
Mhm.
don't get that. That doesn't make any sense to me.
And I was just visiting Formula F1.com, and I didn't see so many trackers in there because they've upped their thing, and they were now hiding under Google Tag Manager. So, so Google Tag Manager is a container where you could throw in 200 trackers under Google Tag Manager, but it still would say one tracker. So the count certainly is not the only thing that matters. But if you have containers like Google Tag Manager, which might contain 200 trackers in there, so
Well, there's the trackers and then there's the cookies. So
Yeah.
like maybe I can even let's see if I can maybe showcase some of my producing skills here. So if I share my screen and show you fellas, no, that's not the screen. Here's the
How many
screen.
screens do you have there?
I mean, there's a few. And so there's required cookies, functional cookies, advertising cookies. It'll tell you some purposes, but if you go to just advertising cookies, I'm just going to keep
Oh
scrolling
my
here
good.
and you will see what is going on here. So like just quite the quite the wild thing. And I mean, even required cookies, some of them, most of these are necessary. I would argue Google is not necessary. Uh, what do you call the SAP one definitely is not necessary. So they might be functional, but they're not necessary. But the advertising ones are just out of this world, all over the place. But it's a little
yeah,
different
it
because,
looks
like,
yeah,
good.
looks like a Formula One car.
Just for the folks who are listening on the podcast, the amount of scrolling that Tejas has to do to show all these things is it's incredible, actually.
Yeah, and the irony is like if you're on Safari and you can see like the trackers that are there, basically it only shows four, like Raju was mentioning, it's all hidden under this Google Tag Manager and those. So technically you only think there's four trackers, but trackers and cookies are definitely different things and have different assets associated with it.
Can I propose a deep dive video on trackers versus cookies? I think
That's
that would
probably
be
a
a
good
great.
idea. And maybe
Oh,
we'll
I
take a
love
look
this.
at this and we'll just see what's going on at maybe everyone's favorite website and see how privacy conscious they are.
Just to let people know the website he's pulling up, the Los Angeles Rams website.
That's weird. Before, when I went to the Rams.com, like it would give me that like security error, like you're about to enter like a malicious website. So, do you accept like uh, what do you call the consequences associated with it? But maybe they got rid of it now. Who knows?
Well, they
Anyway,
did a
so
little update because they had to put world Super Bowl world champion Rams on everything.
all right. All right, cool. So even this was an interesting chart that we had to switch gears a little bit based on some data that was created based on a poll, and essentially they asked people if they could approximately how much do you think brands would pay to collect the following personal information for you. And so there's a bunch of different attributes here, things like gender, age, birthday, device data, purchase history, passport number, banking information. It's kind of interesting just to see where consumers seem to think the value of their information is. And so there's a couple different categories for those listening. There's less than $10 for that piece of data, $10 to $50 for that piece of data, $50 to $100, and then $100 or more. And so the two extremes is gender is the cheapest. Most people, 50%, think that gender information is worth less than $10, but something like banking information, 54% believe it's worth over $100, which, I mean, most of this seems like it adds up pretty well. Financial information is, I think, the biggest factor and driver for a lot of purchase decisions. So it makes sense that that would be the most valuable. Passport number, I didn't really understand why people thought passport was more valuable than social security number. Or not social security number. I misread that. Social media activity. But maybe passport number is tied to something. But I think that maybe could just be a misunderstanding of the value of a passport number. Is passport number important? I don't think so for
The
much.
travel industry spends a lot on advertising.
So based on passport number, could you find out like travel history potentially?
Well, because date of birth is anyway available, name, gender, age, all of those are cheaply available. Associate passport number, you have a good amount of identity, and then other linkings, I guess.
Yeah, a couple different ways. Brent, anything stick out to you?
I'm trying to kind of figure out what the trend would be. So, what of these different types that we're seeing do you guys think will be trending up in terms of how much people think it's worth? Like device data, maybe?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot to choose from. I'm going to say device data because that gives you a lot of information about stuff that's going on, what they're doing, how they're using, the
When you
device,
say
the apps on the device too.
when you say trending up, you mean cost going up or down? Because I don't see
I
cost going
mean,
up any of these.
Or
yeah,
perceived
like
value?
the value of the data, maybe.
The value will keep going down for each of these. If you fast forward this say few years, location the geolocation is going to be available everywhere. That's the new birthday or gender, right? The expensive one probably is your DNA data. It's still not public yet. I wouldn't say not public, but it is still to some extent it's available. But that would be probably on the higher side. But the geolocation data and all of those will become pretty cheap. So it will be trending towards it becoming cheap, which means it's available everywhere because everyone collects that information, everyone abuses it, and the cost for that, your daily tracking and daily commute information to your location information is going to be available everywhere.
What about health data? They didn't break that out on here. I would assume that would be skewed towards the upper end, right?
Yeah. So whatever you see here, I think social media activity and above in this list will be cheap data moving forward. It will be very available. But if you see where things are heading, financial data, that is the income you make, the spending you do, your healthcare data, and any other extremely personal data like your DNA data. All of those things will be more expensive at this point, but maybe fast forward 10 years they may become normal. Unfortunately, that is the case, and I hope we don't go down that path, and people will get some kind of sense into it, and hopefully there'll be some laws be passed, but that's the direction we're headed.
Yeah, even I would say I actually just over the past weekend I caught up on I don't know, did either of you guys watch the show on Uber that relatively came out recently? Super Pumped, I think.
That was really interesting to me.
And so like I totally even forgot about the entire story about like the risk of Uber getting kicked off the App Store. That was like back in like 2016, 2017, and like the depths of I would say deception basically that was happening. An entire app was created, geofenced to hide like certain amounts of code. And I mean, I take the show with a bit of grain of salt, like a massive one. But then I went back and dug in through previous articles, and basically there was a lot of content about how even device fingerprinting was done in a way outside of typical fingerprinting. Because normally you have like a unique ID for a mobile device, and here what they basically did was they took a combination of your contact list, your photos, your location, and you put all those together, you kind of create a hash out of it, and that's unique to your value because no one's going to have the same contacts, photos, and location on their phone. Put it all together, you get a new unique identifier, and now you basically bypassed any kind of restriction that Apple could do. So I mean, the creativity here is definitely big and something that I think got brushed under the rug way too easily because I think there was a, as Brent would say, a lot of nefarious intent from Uber at the time, and it just shows that if there's a will to get the data somehow, there will be a way because people will find a way to figure out how to game the system properly in order to get what it is they claim that they want. Let's see, but I mean, on the privacy topic in general, it was kind of a big week, I think, because there was this really big conference about privacy that happened, and there was a couple keynote speakers. Tim Cook was a big one, and during Tim Cook's presentation, he talked about obviously Apple's stance on privacy and where he believes it's kind of going. I think he kind of focused a lot on the App Store, which I mean does affect Apple's bottom line. So you take everything he says with a pretty big grain of salt as well. But ultimately, he's talking about the actual App Store being like this privacy focused place that everything gets reviewed and keeps track of everything and keeps you safe, versus the push for the ability to sideload applications being an open, I would say, an open potential for companies to sideload their apps and then not go through any kind of security and privacy review that Apple does, and that kind of becoming the norm. Because at that point, why would you go through the hoops and hurdles of the App Store when you don't have to? I see both sides of the argument. I mean, I understand it from a greed perspective. They're making money on the App Store and they want to push that. But also, I do agree that the sideloading is nice, but if you have a good app, you shouldn't need to sideload it. I mean, ultimately, like a good app would pass those standards. Did you guys kind of get anything else out of it?
I mean, in general, I like Apple's stance on privacy. I like what they're doing, except the AirTag surveillance. For the most part, I do like what they're doing. So it's a good move, and it's not a surprise that he's part of the discussion, because there are none of the other CEOs from other big companies can make a case, because they have they are the culprits here. And but after a point, it felt like a Apple commercial to me.
Yeah.
Is pitching App Store and whatnot. So I agree. I see both sides of the equation, like you did. Just that I would appreciate an additional side loading, or at least options to have additional app stores. Like imagine having a privacy centric app store. It's not going to be about volume, not millions of apps. Imagine all you have is maybe 100 apps. Like pretty much the apps or tools that we recommend will be there, right? We know they are privacy conscious and whatnot. Is there a case for that? There is, but completely removing it and completely not allowing that is not the option. It should not be a binary option. I think Apple should provide that option. Is there an option for abuse because of side loading? Absolutely. We see that with Android all the time. So it is a double-edged sword, but I think we'll be better off offering that. And also, I disagree with a single company being in charge of all apps globally. Every country will want their own. We are heading down that path. Fast forward a decade, I believe, and looking back, we would have seen the history of the internet as well as these stores where, we are in the golden era of internet, and every country may have their own version of internet moving forward. And the same way, every country will have their own version of app stores and many others. That's where we are headed. So whether Apple likes it or not, I believe, the current global dynamics will push everyone that direction.
It almost feels like sometimes some of these really big uh, companies with billions of daily active users think of themselves as actual countries, and they want to try to operate as if they are a country, and they're not. I mean, they're just not. Anyway, that was my little aside to that. I think the first couple of minutes of Tim Cook's keynote were probably the most compelling before he kind of got into the
Commercials.
all that other stuff. But the thing that I think the biggest thing that stood out, or my takeaway, this line, I don't think I'm going to say it exactly the way he said it, but it was I think he said the data industrial complex is the foundation of surveillance capitalism or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That is
Yeah.
so spot on. And he said he had a really good riff. Like I said, the first couple of minutes, that's the thing that kind of the bedrock of what I took away, and how they want to, the lack of privacy leads to the lack of empathy and lack of trust. I mean, he was on a really good roll for that. And I think we mentioned it last week, or Raju mentioned it last week, that Apple should be the company kind of leading the way in this. And it sounded like, up until the parts that you talked about, it sounded like they're going for it, or that's kind of their, maybe the vision, before he kind of, swerved off to the other stuff. If he, if he sticks to that or focuses heavily on that aspect, I think, there's an opportunity to see some really significant progress made. The one thing I would kind of caution against, though, is don't try to get into the advertising space more than you already are, because you don't need it. We've all seen their revenue is like 95% actually selling stuff that people love to buy, physical things. There's I, there's no need for them to go there, but that doesn't mean that they don't go there, because a lot of companies don't need to do certain things, but because they can, they do it. So I want to see. I mean, I think it was a really great. At least the first part of it was really great. I want to see what happens in the next year, and then maybe when he comes back, how things have changed or stayed the same, or whatever
They,
the developments are.
they're trying to have it both ways by doing ads on one side, and then there's we talked about it several times, and that's their mistake. The trust will be gone. Similarly, when you're doing a keynote like this, I would have seen him not tie it with his products. So he's trying to tie in the data industrial complex with what they have is app industrial complex,
Mm.
and you're trying to tie the two, and that is an issue. Therein, the trust factor. I mean, at the end of it, I saw it as a pitch, another commercial. But as you rightly pointed out, Brent, the first part is really good. He should be one of the visionaries, and he should be able to lead this privacy movement. But instead, it went down the wrong path. That's where Apple is trying to have it both ways. There is good value to just focus on privacy.
Yeah, I mean, even then, there was this article that came out last week where basically it said that iOS update for privacy notifications or whatever did little to actually reduce tracking, which was kind of surprising because I thought the opt-in rate was so low. So I was kind of interested by the article, but basically it says that um, more or less, kind of going back to the Uber example, when people want to figure out a way to track you, they'll find a way to track you, and that permission setting hasn't really changed an incredible amount of stuff. So here it says, while information gathering firms that engage in invasive data collection now face higher barriers thanks to iOS 14 privacy measures, the researchers observed that the number of tracking libraries within apps on average has remained more or less the same. That in itself doesn't say much because you can have the libraries there, and if someone turns off or turns on the tracking toggle, that doesn't really make a difference. You just keep the libraries for the hope that someone does opt into it. But the other thing they said were they argue that Apple's double standard gives a competitive advantage, access to data, just like Raji was talking about a second ago. Apple's data limitations, they contend, have empowered Apple to track while helping large rivals like Alphabet and Meta to consolidate their market dominance. So yeah, like, I mean, basically same thing Roger was just saying, trying to have your cake and eat it too. And it's it's not very good. I mean, Google and Facebook are gonna say that, so obviously they're gonna be their angle. But what do you call it? Broadly speaking, just the app transparency tracking ATT, yeah, prompt seems to have not turned down much. Did you guys get anything else out of this, or pretty straightforward? I think wasn't a lot
I
of
mean, I
meat to
didn't see
this one.
Yeah, I didn't see the point of the article. It was, I mean, just because, let's say, there's no, let's in their in whatever they have measured, just because there's no impact doesn't mean that Apple shouldn't try, and doesn't mean that we all don't care about privacy and whatnot, right? So, it's. Is it? Did they pick the metrics to fit the narrative, or did they make up the? So I don't know, but I'm actually glad Apple is going down this path, and I think the same author has written another article that talks about some revenue going down for Facebook or whatnot. So which one do you pick? So
You know, and I guess you got to keep everything in context too. It's like, you can't just stop a charging rhinoceros. All right, is that how you say it? Rhinoceros? Yeah. Oh, you don't expect him to like stop on a dime if he's got full speed up. And this privacy or lack thereof, it was a speeding, and it still is a speeding, runaway kind of train. So if you expect, somebody holding a stop sign up in front of it to stop it immediately, uh, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's going to take effort. It's going to take time. It's going to take more than one company. It's going to take like a whole creating a whole different kind of culture around how you look at data and how you use it and how the ethical side of it. That doesn't happen overnight just because a company made an update once. So yeah, I agree, with you guys. Terrible article. You guys stink. No, I'm just kidding.
All right. The other one I thought was actually a little bit more interesting, and I'm pretty sure it came from a Google website, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Think what Google is the website, so it's like a case study that they basically presented. How Kia is boosting business by focusing on first-party data, and so there's a big talk about kind of first-party data collection, third-party data collection, how that kind of impacts marketing and marketers overall, and where we kind of see the trend going. And basically, the story kind of goes here where Kia collects a lot of information on their Kia website. Dealers collect a lot of information who are actually selling to customers. The real customers of Kia is not the person who buys the car, but is actually the dealership who buys the car from Kia. So that's who they're catering to as a manufacturer of vehicles. And the dealer has whatever marketing activities that they're doing for their end customers. And so what they did was they combined the two. They took information that Kia was collecting on Kia properties, web properties like the car configurator and whatever visits that they were doing, combined that with dealer data through, I would say, the magic of Google, and were able to yield some better results, 4 times more conversion rate, 268% increase in click-through rate, and 55% new user engagement compared to our benchmarks. Sounds like it worked out pretty well for them. It's always weird when you read these articles and it's like, well, did you sell more cars though, or was that not the point? Was the point like for people to see this like new and arguably ugly redesigned Kia logo that they've come up with? Uh, is that the goal, or what the point of it was? Did you guys kind of gather anything else out of it? I mean, there is definitely a conversation about how companies are collecting a lot more information on their own properties and how they can leverage it with third party stuff. I think they kind of see the writing on the wall that third party data might be getting more constricted. What did you guys think of this one?
I tried to log in. I tried to read the article, and they asked me to log into my Google account, and I haven't logged into Google. I haven't logged into Google in a few years. I'm not doing it to read a Google case study. So I don't have an opinion on this.
I guess I still do log into my Google account. So, um, the real thing is they're talking about the first party data. Everybody's talking about that now, which means you have the whole direct to consumer. You have to build your own digital bridge so that you can engage directly and not have to do what well, not do what you were able to do in the past, because that seems to be, at least if not going away completely, being siphoned. So you have to learn how to, like, communicate with your customer in a completely different way, and that's really what this is all about. They I don't think they're going to show you anything other than the numbers that really might impress people.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is all about, we're helping folks build a direct way to communicate without having to go all these multi third directional, you know, things that you won't be able to do. So you better start now. And here's how we're doing it, and we can help you too.
I'm interested in all the case studies that didn't make the list.
I'm
That's
sure
very
there's a
funny.
lot.
And then I think we'll wrap with I thought a relatively interesting article on a couple different fronts. This one was about the public launch or public beta launch of DuckDuckGo browser for Mac. And it was interesting on a couple fronts. I mean, I think there's privacy-centric browsers out there already. Brave, Vivaldi are two pretty popular privacy-centric browsers out there. What caught me a little bit differently, more from a technology side than a privacy side, was most of these browsers are generally built on top of a Chromium engine. So like the open source version of Chrome before Google, like um, what do you call ruins it. And here what these guys did is they don't actually use it on Chromium. It's built on top of, I think, Safari itself and WebKit, and um, it's kind of a little bit more native to the product. Does that really impact privacy here and there? I'm not really sure. The article itself in their press release didn't really have a lot of details of what they're actually doing to protect your privacy, if that's really the big thing. I mean, it's probably got basic, tracker blocking and, basic level of privacy protection, but I didn't really see them coming out with any kind of like X factor features. Did you guys see anything on this one, or also feel the same?
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same. At a high level, what they have released is not a full-fledged browser. Basically, a wrapper on a browser. And on Safari, they use WebKit. I mean, sorry, on Mac they use WebKit, right? That is the Safari's engine. But on Chrome or on Windows, which they plan to launch earlier, I think they'll end up using Chromium, or they'll end up using Edge, and Edge uses Chromium.
Yeah.
So they have to use the native thing, which means they're not really doing the core engine part, because the browser has two aspects. One is the core rendering engine, and then there is a layer on top of it for visual. They're doing a few things like password management and whatnot, but I didn't see anything significant that made me even wanting to download the browser, primarily because they lack the depth. In other words, I mean, you probably should expect from DuckDuckGo looking back, because what they do is,
Build
do a good
wrappers.
build wrappers. I mean, that's what their entire search engine is, right? It's a wrapper on Bing.
Yeah.
So just like DuckDuckGo, the search is wrapper on Bing. You see this browser which is the wrapper on whatever the engine is. So which means it has its limitations. I haven't seen it to really understand the deep implications. The thing is, all these trackers have become really smarter, where they are embedding themselves within the rendering engine. If you do not control the rendering engine, then you probably can control a few things, but not in depth. This is where the technological depth really matters. And but the reality is, if you are, let's say, I think DuckDuckGo is about 150 employees or so, you're trying to do a search engine on a browser that
Yeah.
doesn't make money, that's a tough one. So the browsers really have a business model problem. It's the same challenge with Brave. In fact, I actually like Brave better than DuckDuckGo, primarily because they do their own engine. In other words, they have built on Chromium and then re-engineered it and built an entire browser. That is a good way to build it. Just like the way they are doing their search engine, where they are building their own index. So in the long run, I like Brave's approach much better than DuckDuckGo's approach. These days we are, this probably become fashionable, where everybody launches a search engine on somebody else's index. Typically, it's Bing. Yeah, it's no different from what's happening in the SaaS world, where everyone builds an app on AWS and whatnot, where 80% is provided by AWS, Google, and all those folks, and they are building some fancy
Just
little
the
app
front
on
end
top of it.
JavaScript wrapper, basically.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what's happening. Majority of these, be it a SaaS app or all of these are. This happens during bubble times, and we're in peak bubble anyway. That's a different tangent. I don't want to go through, but that's what it feels like. There's not a lot of depth, so I'm more excited about Brave than DuckDuckGo.
Do you think some of these things are being done more for promotional, to say, the just to kind of try to grab some attention, as opposed to, like you're saying, doing the really deep, detailed, hard work of actually safeguarding privacy, or just kind of playing at the edges and saying, "Hey, yeah, we're here. We're looking out for you." How much of
I
that is
think
going on? You think?
if there is enough traction, they'll likely invest and replace the rendering engine with their own. I think they are trying to figure out what traction there is, and then figure out a business model. I think, as I said, there's a business model problem. Now, if an investor invests in it and then does another round, they'll use that money to again hire a few people and then get deep into it. But they still have to show the business model. While I like, say, Brave better, Brave still has a business model challenge. And they unfortunately they started talking about advertising in their search engine, which you know how that ends. So that is the challenge. So the entire industry, particularly both for search engine as well as you know as well as the browser, there's a business model problem. Now I'm curious to see what DuckDuckGo will do on the Windows side, because Edge uses Chromium, and Chromium, though it's supposed to be independent of Google, there are a lot of Google services embedded in there, and to de-Google, they'll have to do a work. In this case, I guess it is Microsoft that probably de-Google, but now they'll be using Microsoft engine for that. Instead of Google, you replace it with Microsoft. So you're still dependent on others. So that technological depth still is missing in these. So I don't know what their end goal is. They are anyway known for privacy. They have been getting some good attention, and I think several people, maybe Tim Cook may have mentioned all of these in the past. So they are getting attention. Now, what is the next product? And the next product they are launching, password management, which they are including in the browser, is a good addition. And if they get to charge a minimal amount for privacy, maybe that will work. But they're trying to figure it out. I don't know what their end game is at this point.
Yeah, you mentioned the business model problems. I mean, ultimately, you either have ads, you have subscription, you have one-time fees, or you have something innovative. I don't think we're seeing innovation anytime soon, so we're stuck between the first three. Ads we don't want to get into. One-time is not, long-term sustainable for continuous development. So then you get into subscription. I mean, I don't think charging anywhere from like $1 to $10 a month is like a wild number for a browser that you're on 6 hours a day. Probably doesn't seem like a crazy thing compared to what else you spend money on. Now people probably don't want to spend that in general just because they're used to getting it for free and they don't really see the trade-off. But if you were to arbitrarily, let's say, you take that initial chart that we had on how much value is associated with pieces of information about you, and you kind of find a way to calculate your dollar saved, or how much information about you was prevented from leaking, or something along those lines, could be a way to reinforce that there is value in this data protection that you're doing. But yeah, I think it's a hard sell. Luckily, if you're lucky, let's say maybe you can get like, I don't know, under 100,000 users at $5 a month. Still not the most scalable thing in the world in order to build and maintain engineers to run everything on 500 grand a month of revenue. That's not going to get you very far. So yeah, it's an uphill battle, which is kind of why it's a little disheartening, because it's an uphill fight for a lot of these people until the business model thing can get figured out. I guess there's always Web3, and that could solve us all, and we'll have some tokens and run that route until Facebook decides to take 50%. But go ahead, Raju.
One wild shot exit strategy is find a deep-pocketed billionaire who is willing to buy it and take it private.
Have anyone in mind?
There could be a few. But,
yeah.
Ultimately, I don't think that's that far off. Like, even, to talk about like the current Musk Twitter news, the take is ultimately like there's a lot of services that are important, and when you financialize them, it becomes problematic. So how can you take the finance out of it? It's like no different than I run a nonprofit that does X, Y, and Z. Plenty of very wealthy people run nonprofits that do X, Y, and Z. Most of the time, you don't know what X, Y, and Z even is, but whatever. And you're like, all right, cool. This is my charity project. This is how I give back to an extent. I'm not really expecting to make money. Probably trim staff and keep it a little bit more in like life support mode. But ultimately, I think it's for the good, right? It doesn't seem like a bad thing to me, but there are certain things that are like good services that when you financialize them, it becomes negative services essentially, right?
Absolutely. I think browser is one of them. So that is where I support a browser that has a similar model to Wikipedia. It offers an extremely important service. And if you don't financialize them, then there is a model. And if you take some rounds of funding, then you're already going down the wrong path. Unfortunately, I believe Brave raised some money or something like that. But that is where I'm not crazy about that. But I think there is an opportunity where somebody runs it like a Wikipedia. There is an opportunity, and there is a place for a privacy centric browser that is not trying to make an exorbitant amount of money.
Yeah, Brave picked up 35 million in 2017. I don't know how they're going to give that 35 million back, but either call it a
Mm.
donation if you actually want to help with that, or you call it an investment if you want a return on it. But you can't have both. But yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll see a couple more services like this where um, there's just not money at the root of kind of why these things end up going in the direction they end up going in.
Good luck with
Um,
that.
let's see. I think that's kind of it off the top of my head. Anything else you guys got for the week, or pretty good?
In general, I think I like the this week in particular with the privacy conference going on. I like the fact that there is more awareness coming. The fact that how often do you see, the Tonight Show or what John Oliver show
Mm.
and then Tim Cook speaking and raising awareness. I see that as a good news. I hope this will continue. The momentum should continue.
Yeah.
FTC and all of those also are talking about it, but again, it's all talk, no meat there. So hopefully, we'll see something come out of it. But I'm actually happy to see this awareness being built.
Yeah, I mean, I think awareness is the only thing that really ends up driving change. I'm still partially convinced, maybe like the conspiracy side of me is ultimately like you can't have politicians really change a lot of this privacy collection because they spend a lot of money targeting ads to get votes. So like it's not really in their best interest to prevent that data collection and like have that, targeting capability. But so until some other pressure happens, why would you
May-
want to, right? Just like
Yeah,
as a business, if I
maybe.
can target, why would I want to turn that off?
Yeah, maybe there will be some exceptions rule, just like you can do. Politicians are exempted from insider trading. You
Yeah.
know, maybe this will be possible.
Yeah. Okay. I'll hold my tongue on that one. I do think seeing Tim Cook at that summit,
Yeah, it means a lot, right?
that means, yeah, because he was. I mean, I thought, oh, maybe he was just going to be there virtual, or he was there. He was right up front. Uh, I think that sends at least a pretty significant sign. It's all in the follow up from here. What happens after that? That'll be interesting.
W- want to be the host of Watching Privacy event, Brent?
There it is. Yeah. Can we get Tim and Mark? No, no.
I mean, we'll have to create a pretty elaborate registration form, get everybody's social security number, their passport number. You'll have to submit like a zip of your browser cache so we can get all your cookies, and then you're welcome to come in
No,
and join the conference.
we'll get Clearview to be a technology partner,
Oh,
and
I think it would be a
just look.
silver sponsor, maybe. But yeah, I mean, like you said, Brent, I think it's often like maybe underappreciated, but in my mind, there's like you have like a league of people, maybe in like the Tim Cook level, Elon Musk level of like wealth and like importance. And for those people, like, usually they say like when you get wealthy, time is the factor, not the money, right? And so like anybody that's like that stature generally or that impactful is taking time, hours, even just transport, getting there, speaking, prepping for this topic shows that there is a level like that is a third of that day that they value very highly that is dedicated to this cause, and I feel like that's kind of a good thing, right? And hopefully we can get more and more of it. But people also often say like you can throw some dollars at it and solve the problem, but the dollars aren't the issue. It's like the time and the awareness and like the impact that your voice will bring. Sometimes that can be even more valuable than the dollars. Dollars are always nice, but there's like two sides of it, and I think the time is just kind of never really considered as being that important either, right? But yeah, I think we can kind of wrap with that too. Let's see. We are Kicking season 2 on YouTube. Watch, like, subscribe because we have to do it. I don't know if we ever mentioned it last time, but we did hit the subscriber mark. So we are now like a proper YouTube channel. And so it's youtube.com/watching privacy. We don't have the bunch of weird characters. I don't. I mean, we don't have ads. I don't think there's ads that play on this, so hopefully not. And then on Twitter, we're talking a lot more. You can catch us on Watching Privacy. A little bit more slang in the term. There's no G in watching, but you can find us there. We're talking about privacy topics. It's been a pretty busy couple of weeks, especially with this conference going on and learning a lot about what other companies and people in the industry are talking about. So YouTube, Twitter, podcasts, audio version. Maybe audio is not. We're not pros at it yet. I'm not going to lie to you because we got to explain things and we're used to the video format, but we'll get better. And if you want to listen to us, then you're welcome to on Spotify or Apple or Stitcher or whatever people get podcasts from. I'm sure it's just kind of everywhere. If not, go to YouTube and I guess give Google your data as you watch our show.
We can safely say that we'll not be monetizing this through ads.
Oh, isn't that what we were doing? Isn't that the whole point of the show? This episode is brought to you by Clearview AI, the world's leader of facial identification software, whether you like it or not. All right,
And
cool.
on that note,
Adios, everybody. Good talking to you guys. See y'all next week, hopefully.